Uno.
And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another fantastic installment from very, very high above all the puerile and pedantic forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Thursday. Friday. Thursday. No, it's definitely Thursday. Well, anyway, it is Friday for Agent 29, so I thought that, hey, that's my, no, you can't use that. It's my soundbite. Yes, it is Friday here at this studio. Not for the program, but Agent 29 is going to be off gallivanting around. I don't know what he does when he's out of town. It couldn't be much of anything. But tomorrow we'll have Cowboy State Politics Live, Friday, Open Line Friday, from the original Cowboy State Politics studio. If you want to be part of today's program, because it is kind of Agent 29's Friday, we'll do Open Line Thursday today. So if you want to be part of the program, the phone number here in the studio is 307-374-8989. 307-374-8989 is the number. If there's something on your mind that you want to opine about, go ahead and give me a call. One more time, that phone number is 307-374-8989. We begin with another fond farewell. Well, maybe it's not fond. Maybe our farewell is fond, but we just want to be rid of him. Joe Barbuto, the longtime chairman of the Wyoming Democrat Party. Don't worry if you've never heard about him, because most people in Wyoming haven't really heard of Democrats either. Well, they have. It's just those people are hanging out in the Republican Party. Well, Joe Barbuto has decided that he is moving on, and you can't really blame him, because why would anyone want to be the chairman of a party that can't get anything accomplished? That they are pretty much, in effect, absolutely irrelevant, unless, of course, you're hanging out with Drag Show Clark Stith down in Rock Springs. Then maybe there's some relevance.
I think it's a shame that they don't have the relevance that they have. You know, the Globetrotters needed the foil to play against, and we would be better suited if a lot of people were honest and just.
That's absolutely my argument.
And they could get some things done.
Absolutely. And, the truth is, I like Democrats way more than I like any of the redcoats. I mean, come on, put Mike Yin up against Poisonberry Craigo, and I'll go hang out with Mike Yin any day of the week, even though he's a radical Democrat and we don't really agree on hardly anything. At least he is honest about who he is. And perhaps that's the best compliment that we could give Joe Barbudo. He has never once wavered from being the ridiculous Democrat that he absolutely is. And so, anyway, he's moving on. So, from the cow pie, in an article entitled Joe Barbudo, chairman of the Wyoming Democrat Party, steps down after 8 years. And I quote, the Wyoming Democrat Party's chair of 8 years is leaving his position to take a role with a nationwide group that supports state Democrat parties. Wyoming Democrat Party is he, and this is what they always do. The Democrats in Wyoming are always behind. You don't suppose, do you, Agent 29, that this is a response to the Freedom Caucus? Do you suppose that that has anything to do with it?
You can't write a newspaper article in Wyoming without mentioning the Freedom Caucus. Right or wrong, you can't.
Well, I mean, you have to. It's now a rule. So, in any case, Barbudo is joining this organization that supports statewide Democrat parties. Let's see, he's going to step down on May 22nd to begin his new role with the Association of State Democratic Committees. The Democrats always have committees. They don't have parties. They don't have caucuses. It's always the committee, the DNC, the DCCC.
Oh, they have parties.
Well, they do have parties. By the way, I do have a, let's see here. Slideshow. Throw this one up there. So this is an interesting picture. That's big fat Joe Barbudo right there in the middle. And the reason I've got this is there's some interesting characters in this picture. Now, with his head cocked to the, I guess it would be to the left of Joe Barbudo, is Chris Rothfuss. He's the guy with the short goatee and the little tiny horn-rimmed glass. Well, they aren't horn-rimmed; they're wire-framed glasses. And then over to the far left of the screen, I can't remember. That is Dallin. What is his name? Dallin Langford is his name. This is the man that thinks that he's a woman that's in the peach-colored coat there.
Artemis.
No. His real name is Dallin. It's absolutely true. He tries to go by Artemis, or whatever his fake name is.
Well, where did he come up with either name? I don't know.
Who knows? But his legal name is Dallin Langford. That's on his birth certificate, and he can't get away from it. Anyway, so Joe Barbudo says in his email of resignation, quote, "We've navigated some truly unexpected circumstances," wrote Barbudo. He said, "The COVID-19 pandemic, which redefined how the party organizes, right-wing operatives trying to infiltrate Democrat functions." Okay, so they are still harping on those two morons that used to work for Project Veritas that did, in fact, convince Carly Provenza and her husband to let them hang out with them. Okay, it wasn't exactly like it was this mass conspiracy that the Democrats are trying to make it out to be. And the truth is, those two people really didn't learn anything more about the Democrats than we already knew before. Weird. They're pro-marijuana. They're pro-gay marriage. They're pro-abortion. All of these things we already knew. Let's see here. He says the strange reality of a Republican congresswoman from Wyoming becoming one of the most prominent voices standing up against Donald Trump. That's Liz Cheney. Let's see here. It's also a fundraising call. If you can give a little, give what you can. If you can give a lot, give what you should. On and on and on. And the truth is, I think we should just bid Joe Barbudo a fond farewell and let him live off his political infamy somewhere else. Now, I'm sure that we haven't heard the end of Joe Barbudo's involvement in Wyoming politics, but I would say for the time being, we should be pretty well done with him. Now, as you might have guessed, the Wyoming Democrat Party does not really have a successor lined up. No news headlines. It's the current vice chairman who's going to lead the party. So anyway, I mean, maybe news, not news. I don't really know what you call it, but let's just get rid of this stuff. So tell me if this sounds at all familiar. That a president has a debilitating medical condition, and he's unable to perform his duties, and so his wife takes over. And so much so that she's making key decisions in the White House and working with all of the advisors that are hanging around. That really have, that the public was basically unaware, that really isn't all that familiar, of what was going on. And at some points, this person's name is Edith, by the way. So Edith would actually put the pen in her husband, president's hand, and sign official documents. Many historians, though not very credible ones, would say that Edith Wilson, that would be Woodrow Wilson, I hate that guy, his wife's name. From just a cursory internet search, just here's some things about Edith Wilson, and you tell me if any of this sounds familiar. Let's see here. Woodrow Wilson first posed for a photo. Let's see here. Following his attendance at the Paris Peace Conference in 1919, Woodrow Wilson returned to the United States to campaign against strong non-interventionist sentiment for the ratification of the peace treaty and for the League of Nations covenant, which, by the way, America never joined the League of Nations. That was never ratified by the Senate. However, in October, Woodrow Wilson suffered a stroke that left him bedridden and partially paralyzed. Edith Wilson and others in the president's inner circle, including his physician and a few close friends, hid the true extent of the president's illness and disability from the American people. Edith also took over a number of routine duties and details of the executive branch of the government from the onset of Wilson's illness until he left office almost a year and a half later. From October of 1919 till the end of Wilson's term in 1921, Edith, acting in the role she later described as a stewardship of the presidency, decided who and which communications and matters of state were important enough to bring to the bedridden president. In her later biography, Edith Wilson wrote, quote, "I studied every paper sent from the different secretaries or senators and tried to digest and present in tabloid form the things that, despite my vigilance, had to go to the president." Despite her vigilance. I myself never made a single decision regarding the disposition of public affairs. The only decision that was mine was what was important and what was not, and the very important decision of when to present matters to my husband. So in 1919, Woodrow Wilson is debilitated in his bed. He can't really get up and move around. He's had a really terrible stroke, and his wife, Edith Wilson, has decided that she's going to take over the functions of the government. So you compare that to what has happened the last 4 years. Are there any parallels that we could bring? I mean, are there any similarities? Well, we did have a commander-in-chief who we're pretty sure was not signing anything. In fact, the vast majority of the documents that have come out of the Biden White House were clearly signed with an auto pen. The most famous of those, or the ones you've probably heard of, are all of the pardons, or so-called preemptive pardons, that were given out to his family, to Anthony Fauci, and to a number of people in Congress. But all of those were signed with an auto pen. Now, the question is, why? If Biden was so out of his mind, what would it matter what was put in front of him? I mean, if you could convince him of anything, I mean, if he was full of dementia and didn't know where he was. By the way, play cut number 2 for me.
We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing. Elect me. I'm in the 20th century, 21st century. True international average of pressure. I want to be clear. I'm not going nuts. The beer brewed here, it is used to make the brew beer in this refinery. Oh, Earth Rider, thanks for the Great Lakes. I wonder what it's like. This guy is moving to foment hate. He doesn't want to shed light. He wants to generate heat. And he's stroking violence in our cities. But President Trump and the demagogues around the world, Donald Trump
all right, that's enough. We get the point. So most of those were from when he was campaigning for office. A few of those little sound bites are from when he was actually president. The beer brew here when he was president. I'm in the 20th century. That's when he was president. But I mean, that's Joe Biden. So he's clearly not in possession of all of his faculties. So again, why is this any different from what Edith Wilson did? I don't think it is. Now, the best thing, and I've got a piece here in the stack of stuff it's right here in front of me. The easiest thing that Republicans can do is find out who was running the country for the last 4 years. And, this is no different than the scandal in, 1919 to 1921. There's no difference whatsoever that the actual condition of the commander in chief was, to the best of their ability, hidden from the American public. And, I think the media was absolutely lying about this. I don't think there's any question. Karine Jean-Pierre would stand on in the White House press briefing and say, well, he's running circles around everybody. I mean, there's no question about what condition he's in. Well, they did hide it from the American public with the aid of the media. Now, when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about what the best course of action for Republicans is. I mean, aside from all the other bills that they're putting forth, but, there's a lot of legislative stuff, the big, beautiful bill that we got to get done. But one of the things that is most important, I think, is who was running the country and hold those people accountable. So we're going to talk about that when we come back from the break. But first, an absolutely outrageous profit timeout. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live. You can listen to the program on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, on Rumble, pretty much everywhere. It's almost like I'm omnipresent. If you miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics Live, you can always go to the live replay, which is located at the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, under the live replay button. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics Live every Tuesday through Friday at 8 a.m. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live on YouTube, Facebook, X, and on Rumble. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. In fact, there's a whole bunch of them that I have no idea that Cowboy State Politics was accessible on, but they're there nonetheless. So why do I say that the number one thing that the Republicans need to do is to find out who was running the country? Because for the sake of the Republic, we have to know that there is one guy that's in charge of everything, the President of the United States. Now, for a really long time, I, as a historian, personally believed that there was no way that somebody could infiltrate the White House and take control of the president's desk. I mean, how could that possibly happen, right? You have to have an election. And, there's all sorts of safeguards. You have to actually be qualified to run for president. You got all those people in Congress who are allegedly making sure that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. There's the media, the fourth branch of government that's supposed to be watching everything. But how did everything coalesce into one event to where Joe Biden was really not running the country and it was a number of people surrounding him? I mean, how is that possible?
I think part of the problem is that the job is bigger than any one person, and so any one person that does that has a number of advisors who are there routinely. If you go to the Wyoming Capitol and you see Governor Gordon walking around, you'll see Drew Perkins and two or
Always.
three others that are always there with him. And sometimes I wonder, in our case, who's really the governor? And I think that question probably honestly could be answered. It depends on what the topic is.
Yeah, well,
There are ones that Drew, for example, is going to be way ahead of other people because this has been his life for so long. And so we don't necessarily have a single executive.
true, true. And it's I think that you're right that we do have every executive, whether he's the governor or the president, does have a number of advisors surrounding him. And I think that we could absolutely say that a number of presidents have had some really, really bad advisors. Joe Biden, for example, being vice president. Joe Biden was absolutely wrong about every foreign policy matter that he ever decided on or spoke out against. I mean, he was even against killing Osama bin Laden. So, I mean, really, how much should you actually listen to him? Well, in 1959, a guy named Richard Condon, I think that's how you pronounce his name, published a book called The Manchurian Candidate. There's been a lot of movies that have been made, along this same plot line, but it was always considered like political conspiracy type theory, right? How could you possibly get somebody else in the White House who was not in control? Well, the book details a conspiracy where a U.S. soldier, Raymond Shaw, is captured during the Korean War and brainwashed by Chinese and Soviet agents. His brainwashing is later activated by the communists to lead Shaw to assassinate a U.S. presidential candidate so that his running mate, Senator Islan, will win overwhelming support. Islan had been put into place by his power broker wife. I mean, isn't it amazing that all of this always goes back to the wife? Anyway, who is also Shaw's mother.
All the way back to Adam and Eve, if you want to get right down to
Yeah,
it.
absolutely. To install a Chinese communist dictatorship if elected. The highly convoluted plot led a reviewer for Time magazine to suggest that this book should be on the list of the best bad novels. Now, the book did win at least a couple of influential fans, though. It was turned into a film directed by John Frankenheimer and starring Frank Sinatra and Bennett Marco, Shaw's platoon mate who discovers the conspiracy. So this has been a plot of political thrillers for a really long time. But until very recently, I don't think that too many people considered that it was actually possible. All right, now let's consider the circumstances of where we're at right now, or where we were. Joe Biden, dementia-ridden. By the way, play cut number 2 for me.
We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing. Elect me. I'm in the 20th century, 21st century. True international.
Okay, that's enough of that. So we all know that that's going on. We heard Joe Biden over and over and over make gaffes when he was speaking, actually become disoriented. There were several times where he was, in another country. Italy comes to mind, and he just wanders off the stage. So we have so many of those examples, and the media and all the people surrounding the president just absolutely insisted that no, Joe Biden is absolutely fine. Well, okay, so first of all, we know that he wasn't, and any thinking, logical person could listen to everything he said and say, this man is out of his mind. He is off his rocker. Why aren't we using the 25th Amendment? Because that's what it was put there for. And I mean, that's assuming that everybody surrounding the president is an honest broker, which we all know that they're not. So there's a piece in the Federalist today, and it's entitled, "The Easiest Thing Republicans Can Do is Find Out Who is Running the Country." Quote, "On Sunday, it was revealed that President Joe Biden has an aggressive form of prostate cancer, a diagnosis that likely was made in the early days of his presidency. But Joe Biden admitted it. And this is yet another one of those things that, we just kind of wrote off as a political gaffe because it's absolute insanity what he's saying around it. So play cut number 1 for me.
And because it was a 4-lane highway that was accessible, my mother drove us, and rather than us be able to walk. And guess what? The first frost, you know what was happening? You had to put on your windshield wipers to get literally the oil slick off the window.
Okay, absolute insanity.
That's why I and so damn many other people I grew up have cancer, and why I can't for the longest time. Delaware had the highest cancer rate in the nation.
Okay, so everybody kind of wrote that off as Joe just being Joe. But in retrospect, he was, actually in his dementia-ridden brain, probably being honest with the American people. Well, cancer is not one of those things that just usually comes out of the blue, though there are a lot of diagnoses where people go to the doctor and, you have stage 4 lung cancer. Well, not if you are the president of the United States. There are doctors surrounding you every time there's a little bit of a hiccup. The doctors swoop in and try to figure out what's going on. The difference here, though, is that the media and all the people surrounding Joe Biden tried to the best of their ability to keep his condition hidden. A statement from Biden's office said that the president was diagnosed Friday with a more aggressive form of prostate cancer that has metastasized to the bone. Quote, he probably had it at the start of his presidency in 2021. He didn't develop cancer in the last couple 100 or 200 days, said Dr. Zeke Emanuel, who was one of the people who was examining Joe Biden. Now, this isn't just a story about a former president becoming sick. It's a story about a White House that for years appeared to have actively concealed both cognitive and physical incapacitation from the American public with the help of the press. If Biden was in office while battling an aggressive form of cancer and cognitive decline, then the scope of the cover-up is even larger than any of us could have thought. While there are a million questions, probably more, like who was actually making all the decisions for 4 years, the left is desperately trying to let that pass unanswered. Now, there's one question that can and must be answered first. Quote, is the GOP Congress going to start issuing subpoenas and deposing witnesses to determine who was legally signing presidential orders while Biden's medical condition was being hidden? That is the central question right there. Who in the White House assumed the power to take this country to war? Who in the White House assumed the position of being able to push that big red button? There's not actually a big red button, but that's what we all imagine. Who took that upon themselves? Was it a group of people? Was it 4 or 5? Was it the chief of staff, Ron Klein? Who was doing it? Because we know that it wasn't Joe Biden. Now, the answer to my question is, should anybody in Congress be doing this, finding the truth? And the answer to that is an unmitigated yes. Political commentator Matt Walsh said on X, quote, we need Congress to actually do something finally. Full investigation. Pull every Biden staffer and official into a hearing. Put them under oath. Joe Biden, too. His doctors. Everyone. Who was involved with this cover-up and how deep did it go? And most importantly, who was actually running the country for the last 4 years? We have to know that.
I have a suggestion. Joe was vice president for a time, and they had a group of advisors, close people around them in the White
Certainly,
House.
absolutely.
During the Barack Hussein Obama presidency. If a vice president takes over president, one's going to guess, I hesitate to assume, one's going to guess that many of the advisors are the same folk.
I think that's true.
So I think it's pretty obvious from where I sit that it's the same cabal. So we just had a third term, and the most egregious thing is they were actually bold enough in thinking they could keep this hidden, they could do this, to actually suggest that Biden run for a fourth term, even if they didn't know about the cancer yet, and I believe that they did. That's evil.
Oh, it's absolutely evil. And think about this, right? So let's just assume that this country goes to war, that President Biden sits behind the teleprompter and they juice him up with whatever cocktail they were feeding him. And he gives a statement. And he says, we have to go to war against X country because of X, Y, and Z. And we actually do that. And the United States military is dispatched, halfway around the world, and we attack a country. Now, that didn't happen. I mean, I guess officially, I don't know that, we didn't send forces somewhere. We're always doing something behind the curtain. But let's just assume that there was an all-out war. Well, and then we find out later that the president wasn't the one that gave the order. Now, how big of a historical and constitutional crisis would that create? Just think about that. The person that the people of America voted for, allegedly, was not in control of sending this country to war and making major decisions that affect everybody here. Just think about the magnitude of that controversy. Now, I've got one more piece that I'm going to hit after the break, and it's going to kind of tie in all of this discussion about Woodrow Wilson, Edith Wilson, Joe Biden, Jill Biden, and Kamala Harris, and we'll do that when we come back.
U.S. Coin Capital, we hear from Americans across the United States who have a growing concern about the future purchasing power of U.S. paper money. Many Americans are looking for an alternative for long-term capital. For more than 35 years, the people at U.S. Coin Capital have educated American investors on how to properly accumulate United States gold and silver coins. Call us at 1-800-878-2646 or visit us on the web, uscoincapital.com.
Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics.
Some say standing up for what you believe in is being extreme. Ask any woman in Wyoming. They'll tell you this is called courage. The mainstream media claims that holding the line on important issues is being unreasonable. My mom taught me this is called staying true to our principles. In other places, people argue you always have to compromise to get something done. Here in Wyoming, we know that some things are worth protecting at all costs. Some say it's time we give up on the values that made our state great to accommodate toxic culture. I say it's time to stand tall and protect the values that have served Wyoming well for over 134 years. Join Honor Wyoming as we defend and preserve the Wyoming way of life. Find out how you can make a difference today.
Visit honorwyoming.org. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live. Documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. Welcome back to the program, my friends. If you want to be part of the show, the phone number is 307-374-8989. 307-374-8989. Go ahead and give me a call if there's something on your mind. It's Agent 29. It's his Friday, so I don't see any reason why we shouldn't take some calls and do just kind of like an open line Friday. No, it's not Friday. It's open line Thursday, which I do have that soundbite somewhere. But anyway, if you want to call in, go ahead and give me a call. So before the break, I was telling you that this is a scandal of historic and constitutional proportions. The presidency of Joe Biden is one of the greatest scandals in American history. It's bigger than Edith Wilson. It's bigger than anything that has come up in our 250 some odd year history. The reason I say that it's bigger than Edith Wilson is we had a group of people that nobody knows who they were. I mean, we can make some guesses before the break. I mean, we made some conjectures that it's probably the same people that populated the Barack Obama administration, but we really don't know, and we've got to find that out. The legacy media is only now covering the mental incapacity of the president, and I'm quoting from a piece from The Federalist, who apparently left the entire ship of state to an unaccountable bureaucracy. On Friday, Axios released a Friday night news dump of Biden's 2023 interview with special counsel Robert Hur. We played a little bit of that on yesterday's program, and it is very clear that the guy that we thought was in the Oval Office was not really in control of anything. He didn't even remember the date that his son died. So, I mean, that one's pretty clear. So if you heard the tape and you haven't been in a coma for the last 4 years, then nothing here is truly surprising. You know, a couple times on today's program, I've played parts of the Biden gaffe reel. Nobody is thinking that, you know, Joe Biden was in possession of all his faculties. I mean, I think that we can all say that was pretty well a fact. Now, some of the folks in the media went through the full tapes and found that Biden forgot the names of President Barack Obama's former Secretary of Defense, comedian Jay Leno, referred to Africa as a country, not a continent, and was unaware that he had in his possession a notebook with war advice in it for Obama during an interview that he had with Robert Hur. He was unaware that he was in possession of classified material that he had put in his garage, had no idea. Couldn't even tell you the date of when he was vice president. So all of this is entirely unsurprising unless you're a left-leaning corporate media journalist on the political beat. Now, if you are, then I'm sure that the reports coming out about the Biden in office are jaw-dropping, gobsmacking revelations to you. The media elite are feigning that they are shocked to discover that Biden may have been unfit for office. Now, the release of these tapes was followed by a Sunday afternoon reveal that Biden has been diagnosed with advanced prostate cancer. Now, this is a classic wag the dog scenario. Earlier in the program, I told you that, hey, Biden admitted that he had cancer. Of course, most of us wrote it off as him just being crazy, but he absolutely admitted it. And if you're the president of the United States, or if you're the guy that happens to be sitting in the seat and everybody else is running it, they're going to make sure, and just think about the duplicity of the Democrats here. If they've got a guy in power who is not in control of his faculties, that he is not the one making the decisions, aren't you going to try to keep that guy in office for as long as humanly possible so that you can continue running the country? Of course you are. So why wouldn't you make sure that he's in the best health possible? You would. And this is why I'm saying that that his cancer diagnosis isn't news to anyone whatsoever, that everybody in that administration knew. Now, the cancer diagnosis is certainly a terrible thing, but the idea that this should end the story about what happened in the last 4 years is a farce. It couldn't be clearer now that due to the mental and physical ailments, Biden was a diminished man from the moment that he assumed the office of the presidency. Despite some of the aforementioned journalists calling for a lid to be put on conversations about Joe Biden's health, the reality is that the cancer diagnosis only raises more unsettling questions. Is this really a new diagnosis? Did all of those people in the administration already know? Did the doctors miss something? And think about that for a second. Let's say that the doctors in the White House totally missed that he had stage 4 cancer. Oh my God. If that's true, then what else have those doctors missed? The next president of the United States, hopefully he would fire all those doctors, but he would be in equally as grave risk. So there are a ton of different questions surrounding this, all of which happen to be answered. Yes, President Woodrow Wilson was at one point incapacitated during his final term in office, but that was only at the tail end of his presidency. And when he was done, he was done. He and his wife retired, and then Woodrow Wilson died a short time after. He suffered a series of strokes after his highly energetic campaign to convince Americans to join the League of Nations. Once again, we never did. His wife and even some members of the media tried to cover it up, just like Joe Biden, but ultimately the Democrat Party pulled the plug on his extremely brief flirtation with running for a third term. Now, the analysis, or the analogies here, the parallels are truly striking. So, in Woodrow Wilson's case, the media and his advisors tried to get him to run for a third term, but it became painfully obvious that he couldn't run for president from his bed. That wasn't going to work. That he couldn't be out in front of people. They couldn't just do the weekend at Bernie's thing and drag him around. And so the Democrat Party pulled the plug in favor of electing somebody else. Now, fast forward to Joe Biden. Absolutely, everybody in that administration tried to get him to run for a second term. And it wasn't until that debate performance, that horrible, and man, I should have got some of those sound bites from the debate. They're absolutely incredible. But anyway, it wasn't until after that everybody said, whoa, my gosh, how bad off is President Biden? Well, the reason why there was so much outrage then is one of two possibilities. A, that was the Democrats' attempt to get rid of him. Or B, they knew that the jig was up. They knew that there was no way that he could campaign for another 4 years. Either way, they tried to cover it up. But my friends, this is a controversy of historic proportions, and one that I think you need to contact your member of Congress or your members of Congress, depending on where you're watching this from, and urge them to continue to look into what happened in the White House, because if it is possible that it happened once, it is absolutely possible that it could happen a second time. History, the only thing that we learned from history, or that we should learn from history, is what not to do again. Now, it happened with Woodrow Wilson, that he was, that his wife was running the country. Now, evidently, we didn't learn from that, or at the very least, the Democrats learned some lessons and were able to conceal it a little bit better, or, conceal it from some people anyway. But the truth is, beyond all of this, we must find out who was running the presidency. And until we do that, we can't be certain that the presidency is safe, that the folks that are in power are actually running things, and that those people, even if we know all of those things, that those people are actually safe, that the doctors in the White House are taking care of the commander-in-chief to the best of their ability. Now, if we don't have the answer to all those questions, well, then all this stuff can happen again. And like I said, the one thing that we should learn from history is what not to do again. Let's go ahead and take our third break. And when we come back, I want to talk about the FACE Act. I've mentioned this several times on the program. It's an insidious law that we passed, and there's an attempt to repeal it, as it should be. So we'll talk about that next. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live. You can listen to the program on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, on Rumble, pretty much everywhere. It's almost like I'm omnipresent. If you miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics Live, you can always go to the live replay, which is located at the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, under the live replay button. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics Live every Tuesday through Friday at 8 a.m. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. I'm David Iverson, doing what I was born to do and enjoying every minute of it. Cowboy State Politics is the most listened to political program in the Cowboy State. Thank you for listening. Without you, my faithful audience, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now. In fact, without you, there wouldn't be any reason to do what I'm doing. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching the program. Every day the show is growing, and I can't tell you how thankful I am. And for me and Agent 29. So anyway, thank you very much. So before the break, I told you we were going to talk about the FACE Act, and what that stands for is the Freedom to Access Clinic Entrances, and it was passed to allow people to be able to freely enter abortion clinics. And the truth is, I mean, that's the outward-facing, no pun intended, intent of it. But really, what its intent is to prosecute those people who would protest outside of an abortion clinic. And since the years that it was passed, this act has been used to prosecute many people who were protesting outside of abortion clinics. And in the Biden administration, it was almost exclusively against Christians. There was a famous case, and I forget the name, but lady was prosecuted and given 30 years in prison for singing hymns outside of an abortion clinic. There's lots of cases where folks were praying right outside by the sidewalk of an abortion clinic, and they were prosecuted. So this is a really, really insidious act, and it needs to be repealed. Not because that people don't have a right to enter a clinic, it's that you don't have a right to kill another innocent human being. And if somebody wants to pray for you outside of an abortion clinic, they ought to be able to do that without the risk of going to prison. The left protests anywhere they want, anywhere and everywhere, and they're never prosecuted. It's only conservatives, and under the Biden administration, it was only Christians. So from the Daily Wire, and I quote, "The House of Representatives will take steps towards repealing the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act this week, a law repeatedly weaponized against pro-life activists by Joe Biden's administration," or whomever was running Joe Biden's administration. Lawmakers on Wednesday will mark up H.R. 589, which is the repeal of the FACE Act, which Texas Congressman Chip Roy, I love that guy. Every time that he's on something, my ears prick up just because I generally think he's on the right side of just about everything. Our own Congresswoman Hageman, she speaks very highly of him, so I like the guy. Anyway. So he introduced this bill in January, and it repeals provisions of federal criminal law that prohibit conduct intended to injure, intimidate, or interfere with persons who are seeking, one, to obtain or provide reproductive health services, and two, exercise their right of religious freedom at a place of religious worship. The move comes after years of work by Chip Roy and his team, who aggressively argued in favor of repealing the FACE Act, while the Biden Justice Department used the law to imprison pro-life activists and more activists from 2022 to 2024, often pairing the FACE Act with felony conspiracy charges to lock up peaceful pro-life protesters, most of whom were Christians. President Donald Trump pardoned these imprisoned activists earlier this year. Think about that. I mean, that it takes a conservative president to issue a pardon to people who should have never been imprisoned in the first place. Quote, "Over the past 4 years, we've witnessed the weaponization of the justice system, using the FACE Act to jail Americans fighting for the right to life," Roy told the Daily Wire on Monday afternoon. "It's not enough to merely end the Biden-Harris era discrimination. We must act to reverse course, ensuring selective and unfair political prosecutions are never again possible under this statute." Now, the FACE Act, again, it's been one of the weapons of the left, and now that we have a Republican Congress and a Republican president, there's no reason why it shouldn't be passed. It's absolutely insidious, and it's been used to, like I said, to demonize Christians, to imprison them for years on end. So again, this is another one of those that you need to call Congresswoman Hageman, though I know that she's absolutely already on board with this, but just make sure that your voice is known. And, there's probably some other people you need to call in Congress too. Jam up the phone lines and just make sure that we get rid of this really insidious law. And frankly, from my position, any law that allows people to kill innocent human beings is not only unconscionable, it's morally and ethically wrong. We don't have a right to kill another innocent human being. Abortion is wrong. Abortion is murder, and it is murder in every case. And it's I think a lot of times we tend to try to explain it away, saying, well, we have to have exceptions. No, we don't. It's an innocent human life. And, Agent 29, what do you always say about it? That you're not responsible for where you're.
One is not responsible for with whom one's ancestors slept.
Or where, I might say. So it's not, it's an absolutely unconscionable law, and it's a disgrace to this country that we ever passed it. So we've got a chance to repeal it, perhaps a once in a lifetime chance. Maybe not lifetime is probably, too strong of a word, but we can get rid of it. So we need to do that. Now, a piece that I've been trying to get to for a while, and I really haven't. And since Agent 29 is traveling, I figured we ought to have some traveling news. Yes, indeed, it speaks a life of danger.
My traveling music.
Yes, indeed. So
me and Bob Holland, Dave Holland. Sorry,
yeah.
Dave. Yeah, Dave Holland. That's his theme song whenever we do a rally.
Secret agent man. So if you've ever rented a car, and I say rent a car because I would never purchase one of these vehicles, or at least knowingly purchase one of them, is that you pull up to a stoplight and the car shuts off. Is that not the most irritating thing you've ever had to go through?
It is, and I've had to go through it actually initiating turning it off. It is the rule, or was when I was in Germany, that if you're sitting at a stoplight, you got to shut the thing off. Well,
what?
It cut down on air pollution.
Oh, of course, yes.
But I drove piece of crap, literally $100 cars. I didn't shut mine off because there was no guarantee at all.
It was going to start back
get
up.
It going again.
But every time we, the lovely Christine and I do a lot of traveling for her job and for my job too. Occasionally, I have to go to Dallas, which I'm hopefully going to do here before too long. Anyway, we always end up renting these cars that you pull up to a stoplight and the dang thing shuts off. It's the most irritating thing. Well, new EPA chief Lee Zeldin is going to kill that car feature that almost everyone hates. It's stupid. It doesn't reduce pollution. Actually, it only increases it. Let's see here. Quote, Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Lee Zeldin hinted Monday that he's preparing, and this is, so a couple days old, he's preparing to roll back one car feature that every driver hates, the start-stop technology, where your car dies at every red light so companies can get a climate participation trophy, Zeldin tweeted Monday in a post that has since racked up more than 8 million views. The EPA approved it, everyone hates it, so we're fixing it. The feature kills internal combustion engines at red lights and has been touted by proponents for being able to conserve fuel and cut down on pollution. Critics have questioned whether the feature can wear down a car's battery or engine more quickly. Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Lee Zeldin hinted Monday that he's preparing to roll back that feature. The off-cycle CO2 reducing tech has its origins in a federal rule proposed under Barack Obama in 2012, but it didn't take effect until new fuel economy standards to reduce greenhouse gas emissions happened 5 years later. Between 2012 and 2021, the number of vehicles produced with a start-stop feature due to carbon credits surged from 1% to 45%. Up to 65% of vehicles had the technology included in new models by 2023. Well, one, it doesn't work, and two, it's stupid. So why we would even want that? And it doesn't reduce CO2. And by the way, CO2 is not a pollutant. Oh, another bill that was killed by the super conservative Senate this past year. But first, CO2 is not really a problem. Second, there's way more CO2. And by the way, Agent 29, I've been meaning to talk to you about this. So, do you know what the largest source of CO2 emissions is?
I think I would have to guess forest fires.
I would guess forest fires. And do you know what the number one cause of forest fires is?
Lack of maintenance by left-wing states.
Well, that's true, but what I was referring more to the spark. It's lightning is the number one cause of forest fires.
There's a website out there that the International Space Station has cameras on it,
Yeah.
and it gives you 24/7 the view from there, where they lose signal and they play some other things. But the other day they were headed over Africa, and there was just phenomenal lightning storm going on, and yeah, you get a different view of what Earth is like
Sure.
from that perspective. It's a very, very big place, a tremendous amount of water, and a lot of things that we look at because they're what surround us. We think that's what the whole world is like.
And it's not.
I say that because, and I won't run this into the ground, but you have a lot of people that are screaming about how the population is at its limit. We have completely taken over the planet. And you can tell that's because where they live, that's all they see. They
Right.
Get
Right.
out and look at the rest of the world.
If you live in a concrete jungle, you assume that the rest of the world is a concrete jungle. But I have one more question for you, Agent 29. So who, and riddle me this, riddle me that. So if forest fires are the number one, producer of CO2, and the number one cause of forest fires is lightning, who, may I ask, is in charge of the lightning?
God himself.
God himself. And so we can blame God for whatever CO2 is bilged into the atmosphere. The truth is that CO2 is not a pollutant. It's this whole campaign is nothing but a scheme to scare you into complying and to make money from a whole bunch of other people, which is, by the way, coincidentally, there was a meeting in Lusk, what was it, last night before, where Secretary of State Chuck Gray was talking about windmills.
I think that's accurate.
Yeah. So, and the reason
I don't follow him that closely.
Well, the truth is, and the reason why I was going there is these windmills, they will never pay for themselves.
Oh, yeah.
Ever. Yeah. They will wear out before they start to turn a profit.
I want to go back to God himself for a second.
God himself.
Yeah. He built this planet, and I think he built within it a certain set of balancing. It corrects itself.
Yes, it does.
When something gets a little bit out of hand over here, more trees grow over here, and it just has a self-balancing thing. And, you talk about all the lightning and everything. God's got this. He's fixing it.
Well, he does. And the whole reason, and how arrogant could we possibly be to assume that we, the little people, can control the weather, can control the atmosphere. Truth is, we can't. Now, maybe some technology in the future, way in the future, Star Trek years, I don't know, maybe. But right now, we can't. And to assume that we can have any effect on weather or the climate is pretty darned arrogant, and it's a waste of money, which is what all of these things are. So we've burned up another busy broadcast hour on the program, a Thursday, Friday, whatever it is, for my awesome producer. He's traveling tomorrow, so tomorrow's episode of Cowboy State Politics Live will be back in the original headquarters of this program, and we'll continue on with Open Line Friday tomorrow. Make sure that you subscribe and follow the podcast, and that'll do it. I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics.